Sure. Okay. Welcome, everybody. My name is Steve Campitelli. For those of you who don't know me, I'm part of the AALL panel for PD, and this panel puts on these sessions, these Connect Inspire sessions that we've been going. We're into our third year now, and they are a great opportunity for us to learn from each other and to network and to meet people and to hear interesting new information, which is what we're going to do today. As we always do, I'll start with an acknowledgement of country. And so I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we all are today. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And I'd like to note that I'm speaking to you from Boonwurrung land. Please feel free to tell us in chat what land you are coming to us from today, or you're joining us from today. We'd love to hear where you're from. Okay, next would love to introduce our talk today. This is session number 3 of Connect Inspire Share. The title of it is Designing Accessible Online Resources, something all of us are very interested in, and something over the COVID period has certainly become more salient as something we need to be able to provide for students who are not always in the same place we are. And online is the obvious place for that. What does it mean? What's involved? How do you do it? Our presenters today, beg your pardon, I'm just bringing up the bio, are from the Academic Skills Unit at the Australian Catholic University. Alice Lee is a team coordinator with 30 years of experience developing learning resources while working in the education sector in the USA, Japan, and Australia. Dr. Fern Barclay is a literacy advisor with a PhD in English from the University of Newcastle. Emma Grist is a literacy advisor with a Master's in Linguistics from Australian National University. And Dr. Rhonda Sue is a literacy advisor with a PhD in philosophy and has worked and taught at Wollongong University, UNSW, Australian National University, and Charles Sturt University. The presenters are especially interested in developing lifelong learning and self-directed learning, as well as creating e-learning affordances for students. So with that, I will hand over to Alice, who is going to take us through or facilitate today's session. Thanks, Alice.
I'm actually going to hand it to Fern, who will start us off.
Right. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Alice. Can you all hear me okay? Sometimes I'm a bit squeaky. Excellent. Brilliant. So thank you all for taking the time to attend this session today. I'd like to start with an overview of how this session will be conducted. So the topics and activities include a little background information about who we are. We'll then all get a chance to share our experiences through a series of poll questions. We'll then talk about what does accessibility mean, and then we'll go out into breakout rooms to further discuss our own personal experiences. Now, there won't be time after this session to do a debrief, so instead we're going to be moving on to what does an accessible resource look like, then how do you do it, followed by a Q&A, and then we'll go into the topic for the next CIS session, as well as a quick post-session survey. Now, please post any questions that you have in the chat box for the Q&A, so we'll then keep all those questions to the end, and feel free to share any resources that you may have in the chat box. Now, this session is intended to provide a starting point for discussion, reflection, and sharing of ideas related to accessibility of online learning resources. We recognize that many of the points and questions raised today may not be fully addressed in these 90 minutes. We also understand that it is not possible to adequately acknowledge the resource development expertise amongst the participants of this session. If you'd like to pursue further discussion, please feel free to share your contact details or email Alice Lee, team coordinator of the ACU Academic Skills Unit. Her email address will appear in the chat box now. And if you can, please do stay at the end of the session to provide feedback in our post-session survey. Thanks, Alice. So to provide some context, ACU has over 33,000 students and 3,679 of these are online. We have 7 Australian campuses as well as a Rome campus. And the Centre of Education and Innovation, formerly Learning and Teaching Centre, was newly designated in February this year, and the Academic Skills Unit, or ASU for short, is now part of this centre. Previously, ASU was part of the Office of Student Success. ASU staff are distributed across the 7 campuses in Australia and comprise of 1 manager, 4 team coordinators, 11 literacy advisors, and 3 numeracy advisors. Now, the LEO Working Party is comprised of the 4 presenters of this session and is one of several working parties within the Academic Skills Unit. Thanks, Alice. Again, LEO stands for Learning Environment Online. The platform for ASU's LEO is Moodle. However, the platform will change to Canvas in 2024. The Academic Skills Unit site on LEO is a one-stop shop where students can access our online resources, book individual consultations, find workshop information and schedules, register for workshops, send emails to our Ask an Advisor service, and access our partner service, Studiosity. The LEO site is one of our core services. It has been heavily used by students, especially during the recent COVID disruptions. As pointed out by student panelists from the University of Western Sydney during a recent Studiosity-sponsored symposium, there has been a mental shift on the part of students towards online flexibility and digital equity. Because our LEO site is so extensive, a working party exists to oversee the resources and maintain the site. The following are key tasks of the working party. So we format and maintain site pages. We ensure consistency and currency of pages, information, and navigation. We upload content and learning resources developed by the Academic Skills Unit. And in regard to design accessible learning objects, the LEO Working Party, as well as ASU advisors not on the Working Party, are involved in designing online resources for projects within our unit or with faculty and lecturers. We also check all learning objects and site pages for accessibility and provide training for staff. Now, the online resources on our LEO site are created using the following tools and formats: Microsoft Word, Venngage Infographics Creator, H5P, JPEG and PNG images, PDFs, tables, YouTube videos, and Qualtrics. All right, thanks, Alice. And now I'll pass it on to Rhonda.
Great, thanks, Fern. So that was an overview of who we are and what we do. We're now going to ask everyone to participate in an activity where you can share your background and your experiences. So for this activity, please use a mobile device, Wi-Fi enabled tablet or an internet browser window on your computer. You can either scan the QR code on the screen or type the URL below into your browser. So for your browser, please use Chrome, Safari, or Microsoft Edge. If you're using your mobile, you'll need to accept cookies. So once you've accepted cookies, you'll be taken to the first poll question. And if both of those options don't work, feel free to type your answers in the Zoom chat box. So I'll just give you a bit of time to access that poll. So Alice, when you're ready, we can start with the polls. Great. So some of you have already answered, so thank you. So the first question is, do you create AALL related online resources as part of your work? So that's great. It seems like the majority of you have created online resources. So the second question. So if you did answer yes for the previous question, which formats or tools do you mostly work with? And as you can see, there's a selection there.
It's funny how the graphs keeps moving.
Yep. So it looks like there's a variety of tools being used, which is good, with the PowerPoint slides being the most popular. So, yep, next question. So what platforms do your online resources appear on? So Blackboard, Canvas, Moodle, WordPress, websites, YouTube or Vimeo, or any others? Right, so Canvas seems to be quite popular. So too is Moodle. Websites as well. Let's see, Panopto. Adlets. YouTube. Great. Okay, so I think maybe we'll move on to the next question now. Okay, so does your work unit or department or university have or adhere to accessibility guidelines when creating these resources? So it's great to see yes as the biggest proportion, at least right now. Great, okay, thank you. So if your answer was yes, is professional development or training available to you for adhering to these guidelines? Okay, so more of a mixed response here. Okay, thank you. And what challenges do you face or do you think you'd face in creating accessible online resources? Yep, time. Tools, specific needs, knowledge, expertise and training. Student preferences and competing needs. Yeah, so hopefully the session today will provide you with more sort of information to help you meet those challenges. So thank you very much for responding to those poll questions. And I think I'll pass back to Alice now.
Sorry. Okay, it was really interesting to see all the poll answers, and definitely those challenges are the same ones that we face in academic schools at ACU. And there's a lot of expertise among everyone. I hope we do share it during the breakout room sessions and during the Q&A. We will now turn to the question, what does accessibility mean? You probably have a good idea already, but one idea comes from Carrie Buttery. And VetNexus is a consulting firm that specializes in strengthening compliance practices for digital educational solutions. The idea is that learners can access materials in a timely and flexible manner, and there is content accessibility for disability. Another meaning of accessibility from the University of California at Davis is to enable all students to use course materials and tools and get to, perceive, and navigate course content and assignments. So in our profession, we are used to the idea that academic integrity is everyone's responsibility and that academic language and learning is everyone's responsibility. Well, accessibility is also everyone's responsibility. I know time is a factor here, so we always must keep that in mind. But in Texas Higher Education Standard Framework of 2021, there are two specific sections that relate to accessibility. I'm just pulling up here for you to have a quick scan. I'm not going to attempt to read it out loud to you. As well, legislative guidelines are contained in the Disability Discrimination Act of 1992. While talking about accessibility, it is important to note that it is a component of the broader concept of Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. For the ACU Academic Skills Unit, our guidelines for creating accessible online learning resources in fact comes from our university statements on Universal Design for Learning. Here's a screenshot of the ACU website about Universal Design for Learning. I'm now going to pull up the live site so you can have a quick look. So this is the internet page, and you see the definition at the top, as well as a number of key questions. I'm going to just pull up the section on what are the main characteristics of Universal Design for Learning. So in this section, there are 7 principles related to the online learning environment. The top 4 are the most relevant for Academic Skills Unit in our creation of online resources. And these are the principles of equitable use, flexibility in use, simple and intuitive, and perceptible information. I'd like to point out that the word design is repeated throughout the content of this webpage. The implication is that we don't merely create resources, but we design them carefully and purposefully for all students as best as we can. Now, definitely we cannot accommodate all students, but we do the best we can. Rhonda will now put the links to this webpage in the chat box if you wish to have a look yourself. So I'm going back to the slide now. So based on the university's UDL guidelines, our Academic Skills Unit then formulated our own statement in 2016. The statement is on this slide, but I won't attempt to read it out loud. I would just say that this statement relates UDL principles to specific practices when designing accessible learning resources. We have since then attempted to consistently follow these practices. We have also gained insight from the following sources of information: ACU's Disability Service Staff, ACU's Autism Spectrum Project student panel events, our own Academic Skills Unit student consultations, external PD events that feature student voice and student perspectives, and various documents and web pages on accessibility considerations. Next, on this slide are some useful resources that we have come across. And as we said before, if you come across useful resources, please feel free to post in the chat, and Rhonda has posted these links into the chat. Our Academic Skills Unit's online resource Leo site closely follows the Queensland Government Web Writing and Style Guide, as well as our university's Student Communication Style Guide. The Queensland Government Web Writing and Style Guide actually has a really good section at the beginning to introduce the idea of online, reading online and finding information online, how it's different from reading text in other formats. Rhonda has posted the links in the chat box. And next, Emma will explain the next part of the session.
Okay, it's time for an activity. I know we all love doing activities. So the slide that's currently up on the screen is a poster from the UK government showing the different types of accessibility considerations that we may want to keep in mind when we're designing resources. Rhonda's also going to put into the chat a PDF of the do's and don'ts of designing for accessibility as related to these specific needs, as well as the URL where the PDF can be downloaded. So if everybody could click on that link now and get that open on their computer or device, because we're going to use that when I put you all into breakout rooms in just a moment. So again, Rhonda has put that into the chat there. So if you're having trouble accessing it, please just let us know. Alice, can we move to the next slide? Yep. So shortly, everyone will be assigned to a breakout room, and we're going to have a 20-minute group discussion. In your breakout room, there will be a countdown clock that will show you how long is left. And once the breakout room is closed at the end of that 20 minutes, everyone will automatically come back to this room. When you enter the breakout room, please open up the PDF showing the do's and don'ts of designing for accessibility that Rhonda's just put into the chat box. And we ask that you use the information in this PDF document to discuss the 3 questions on this slide and any other relevant topics if you wish and you have time remaining. So the questions that we'd love you to discuss are: which of the accessibility elements shown on the posters are you already aware of? Which of the do's of designing for accessibility are reflected in your current online resources? And what changes would you like to make to your existing online resources in light of the information that we're discussing here today? So Rhonda's also pasted those into the chat box for you. So hopefully you will still be able to see those when I pop you into your breakout rooms, but just in case, please take note of these questions, take a screenshot or copy them into a document or something. One tip to facilitate the discussion is to have one of the people in your breakout room share the PDF that you've downloaded so everyone can see it and refer to the content during the discussion. Hopefully the instructions for the breakout room discussion are now clear, and I will open the breakout rooms.
We hope you enjoyed the breakout room discussion and found it thought-provoking and useful. As we said at the beginning, we won't be debriefing right now, but we'll go on to address what accessible resources may look like and how to design them. So, yep, thanks, Alice. So here's an example of the top half of our Leo page on the topic of a weekly planner. So what you can see now contains the following style and elements. So the module title at the top, page navigation arrows, 2 heading levels differentiated by font size, a concise paragraph, user-friendly language, hyperlinks with meaningful titles, and 2 formats for the downloadable document, so in Word and in PDF, and 2 levels of clearly differentiated bullet points. So the heading levels and font size, as well as 2 bullet heading levels, were created using built-in Moodle editing tools. That's the first example, and here's the second example. So it's another resource page on our Leo site. We use the H5P course presentation tool to create it, and it's a narrated workshop presentation embedded on the page. And it contains the following accessibility elements. So a clear page heading, concise instructions for using the interactive slides, hyperlinks with meaningful titles, audio narration embedded on each slide, a downloadable text version of the slide content, and a downloadable audio script of the narration, both created in Microsoft Word and saved as a PDF, and built-in navigation to move between slides, and the option for a full screen view for all slides. So for the design of the slides, we used a set of PowerPoint slides and added them to the H5P course presentation tool. So color contrast is an accessibility factor that's often overlooked. On this slide, we have examples of text against a colored background. So you can think about, which text is easiest to read and which text is hardest to read. So for best practice, please consider the use of color. The WebAIM contrast checker website, which I think someone posted in the chat earlier, so thank you, contains recommendations for color contrast ratio and tools for checking color contrast. And Fern has just pasted the link again in the chat for you. So I'll now pass back to Alice.
Thank you, Rhonda. So just a word about all the resources we've been putting into the chat box. Please do open them up or download them on your desktop or save them for yourself before you leave this room, because everything, as you know, disappears from Zoom when you leave and when we close the room. Okay, so next, I will show a few ideas on how to create learning resources that are more accessible. And of course, I think many of us in this room, many of you in this room will also have lots of ideas. One of our ideas is to decide on the accessibility practices to follow. You probably saw from your breakout room discussions, some students' needs are in contrast with other students' needs, but there could be a set of guided ideas that you come up with to follow as best as you can. Taking into account design and formatting. I would just say too that in this session we have two of our math math advisors who are involved in designing math online resources, and they have different issues compared to the literacy materials. So they'd be good if you stick around the Q&A, then they can probably address those questions if you have any. An idea as well is to create some kind of accessibility checklist. So you can simply tick off what's happening on your resource as you're checking them. And Fern will put into the chat box two of our checklists. One is for Word and one is for PowerPoint slides. And our checklists are a bit extensive. You don't need to make them this extensive, but ours include considerations for accessibility, ACU branding, because we have particular branding needs, style, and formatting. Another idea is to make the time to check resources and get feedback if possible. I know it's really difficult to find the time, but for us, we prioritize this, so we have built-in time to work on this. And many of the built-in accessibility tools are available in certain tech platforms or software. For example, Moodle, Canvas has extensive accessibility tools, and Microsoft Word. Microsoft Word is the primary tool we use for creating accessible online resources such as text versions, transcripts, and tip sheets. So Fern has put the links in the chat box. Next, will be a demonstration of how to spot some accessibility issues in a Word document and how to use the built-in Word tools to fix issues. So I'm going to now switch view. Pardon me while I do that. And share the material. Okay. So here you can see a tip sheet for something. This is just a Word document with some built-in issues, which I'll go over, and we'll figure out how to check for those issues. So the first thing is that titles match. So you see here, the title of this document should match the title that you save the Microsoft Word as, because what we do is when we upload these resources to or save it as a PDF and upload to Moodle or Canvas, there will be automatic alt text for this. So if it doesn't, the titles don't match, it's a consistency issue. And also, if you can remember, this is very hard to remember, to put the title also in the info part. So there's a button here, I'll go back to that, under files and info. This is metadata for the title. And this will help a screen reader to make sense of that document as well. And all three of these titles should match. Another thing is the capitalization. Web style guides of the guide of the Queensland government and many other guides I've seen recommend, and our university recommends, first word cap only. So that's a consistent issue. We have so many pages and documents on our online resource site that we need to be consistent accessibility checking for this. And of course, to fix this issue, you would go to, sorry, it's my cap. Here it is. And you just fix it with the sentence case. Okay. Another issue, I will now introduce the accessibility checker. So back in the info section, there's actually a button here called check for issues. Okay, so you can inspect the document and up comes some errors. So one error is missing alternative text for images. So all images need to have some kind of alt text. Okay, and to fix this issue, sorry, there's some information here as well, then how to fix the issue. Right click on the object and select edit alt text. Okay, it's not letting you do it here. I'll do it a different way. There are always multiple ways to fix an issue. There's also warnings about merge or split cells. So tables should not have merge or split cells. There's also an issue about hard to read contrast. And when you click on that issue, it points to exactly where that issue is in the Word document. And issues about images or object not in line. Now, we can't do anything about our branding icon. We have to leave that in. But what we do is we need to edit this. So sorry, I had to click on it. And under edit alt text, if it's a decorative image, that means the content is not important. We just simply mark it as decorative. If it's an image that contains content that you would like the students to know, then we put a short description in it. So then when the screen reader reads the document, it will be able to read to students what this image is about. So I'll mark this as decorative. Okay. Now, other things to check. So for our checklist, we have a number of things. One is font size. So our texts are specified to be Arial and 11-point font. So here we can spot different font sizes. So we need to go ahead and fix those. And also this is Calibri, not Arial. So we need to, again, produce consistency of style and font size for the text. Okay. And another thing to check would be the headings. So for the headings, we have built into this template. So we use an ACU template for our Word, and we apply styles through this tool here about styles. We have included style in our master template. And here you can see this is heading 1. And when you click on the up and down arrow, it brings up the heading portions. But this one is supposed to be equal heading, but it's been done as heading 2. So we need to fix that and put it back into heading 1. Okay, so headings need to be consistent. Same with here, same with here. So we do a headings check. So this is the wrong size for heading 5. We need to fix that and go to heading 1. Okay, so that's how we fix the heading. And then you can see sometimes when you simply click enter after the heading or after certain, when you hit the enter button, sometimes the heading gets brought over to the text. So you see here, there's an arrow here and it's marked as a heading. It's not supposed to be a heading. It's supposed to be a body text. So we need to fix that and call it a body paragraph. Okay, I know these are a lot of minute details, but for screen reader, it reads a hierarchy, and these things are quite important actually. Okay, so let's look at the accessibility checker. There's also the tool here under the review button. What else we got? Okay, we've got missing alt text and the tables and so on. Okay. Another thing we check for is spacing. So here you see 3 bullet points and they have kind of weird spacing in between. So to fix that, we go to this ruler tool and our standard style is 1.15. Just leave a little bit of space in between the bullet points. So that's how we can fix that. Okay. And spacing, when there's an extra space, this extra line, this extra line actually has 2 issues. One is that it's carrying a heading. So we need to put it to body paragraph. And also we actually need to delete this blank line because for a screen reader, it will read a whole entire line like this as blank, 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 which won't make a lot of sense to students. So we do not have enter as a way to create spacing. If you do want to create spacing, say between the heading and the text, use the spacing tool. So you can add a space before and after paragraph, or use line spacing here to send some space before and after as you need to. Okay. Sorry if I'm going over this a bit fast. If you have questions later on, I'm happy to answer. And maybe you have some additional tips that I'm not covering. Okay, next, you saw that the color contrast is not adequate. And in fact, we discourage color, not we, but the guidelines and accessibility considerations discourage use of color in Word documents. So change this back to the same color. We also check images and and line spacing. So here we have an image in the center, and style guidelines accessibility needs say that everything needs to be left justified and not centered, because screen reader reads as blank, 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 and people read online from the left to the right and up and down. Okay, and right click on the image to edit the alt text. So for every image, again, you need to have an alt text. So I'll mark this as decorative. Okay. All right, I'm going to go to bullet points. That's another check that we have. Here you see example of bullet points with two different headings, but they look the same. So the style guide says that they need to look different. So the way to fix is to simply go to the bullet tool and select a different look for the second level of bullet point. Okay. Another issue is here, actually 3 issues here. Again, we have different style. So put this back into body text. There's color in the text. So we're going to remove that. And the hyperlink says click here. This is discouraged for web style. So web style says hyperlinks needs to have meaningful titles. So use the meaningful naming of the page, the exact name of the page if possible, and hyperlink there rather than have click here. And same with this one. It's also a different font size and different font style. Do not provide the URL on the page. So this is discouraged for web style. Include this URL in as a link for that with the descriptive title. Okay. And here we have extra spacing. Again, you see it's carrying over the heading, and we want to eliminate all the space. So one way to eliminate is simply if you have 2 sections and you want to have them on different pages or create extra page, is just to insert a page break. Okay, and that gets rid of, hopefully gets rid of the extra space. Okay. And with tables, we want to get rid of the table merging. And when you right click on the table, it brings up the table properties. And under table properties, we need to assign a header row at the top. So again, screen reader has hierarchy. It wants to read the header to the students. And also header is recommended for any kind of students anyway. Okay. We also would need to put in the alt text for the table, a title for the table, and then a very brief description of what the content is about. Doesn't have to be an exact replicate of the table content, but just some kind of description. And here we have not enough spacing between the table and the heading. So again, we create spacing by this tool. Okay. And another problem is text boxes. Screen readers do not deal well with text boxes, so it's better to remove the text. The other consideration is italics. Italics and underlines actually is discouraged as well. If you want to put emphasis, use bold instead. So we want to make this not italics and take it out of the text box and delete the text box. And the very last thing is to move the cursor to the very end of your resource so that, again, you don't have an extra line. Okay. So there are lots of little details. You may or may not think it's important, but these are the things that we follow in academic skills unit as a matter of course. So now I'm going to switch sharing and go back to the slide. Okay. Let me just catch up to where I'm at. Okay, so pretty much we're at the Q&A portion of this presentation. So at this point, we have just 2 questions I was able to spot. One was from Jennifer Murphy. How do we know what constitutes an unexpected barrier? Jennifer, do we answer your question already, or do you want to clarify what you mean and we can try to respond? If Jennifer's here. At this point, please feel free to unmute yourselves.
Hi, thank you.
Mhm.
It's in the introduction, it actually said, you know, to eliminate unnecessary barriers, but how do we know what they could be? You know, it's almost as if we're if we don't have the full knowledge of what is required, how can we provide it?
Mm-hmm. In the breakout rooms, you saw the different PDF documents with the accessibility guidelines for different students. I guess, again, think about your university setting. What are possibly the best practices or principles that you yourself or your unit can follow? I guess we can't be perfect on everything. All we can do is try to take in as wide of a range of considerations as possible.
Okay,
Does
thank
that
you.
help?
That answers my question. Yes, greatly. Thank you.
There's no 100% perfect here. We're just all trying to do the best we can.
Thank you.
Another question was where we get this PowerPoint. Yes, we will upload the recording and the PowerPoint and materials to the AALL website. So you'll be able to access from there. Okay. Other questions? I love the tips for creating accessible Word docs you've shared. Do you use something similar for PowerPoint? Any of our team want to answer that part?
Yes, we do have something similar for PowerPoint. Microsoft, we find, is actually really great about embedding these kinds of accessibility tools into their software. So all of Microsoft's Word, PowerPoint, Excel, all of those, they will have a little accessibility checker that you can click on and get that kind of feedback.
For PowerPoint, we also find it's hard to make some things accessible. However, they are good for learning design. So what we've compromised on is to provide a text version of all our PowerPoints that's online. So students will at least get the content in accessible form.
And a lot of the time what we do find is that creating accessible resources doesn't mean creating one single accessible resource. It means creating oftentimes multiple versions of the resource. So we've got the PowerPoint, and then we've got the text version of the PowerPoint, and then maybe we've got the narrated course presentation of the PowerPoint through H5P, and then we have the text version of that. So not every resource is going to be accessible to every student, but ideally every resource should have a version of it that's accessible to every student. Hopefully.
That's something that came up in our breakout room before, about the fact that is like some of, do you find that some of the, depending on the accessibility, whether it's, there was like low vision, dyslexia, autism, are some of them, is it possible to create the perfect resource, and is there a certain kind of like template for that? Or
no,
it's
not. It's not.
Yeah. Well, if somebody has come up with it, please tell us. What we do is try to, again, we look at those posters and see what are the commonalities for best design. Are there any commonalities? So a lot of the commonalities were simple text, and simple language. So we focus on that first of all, and then we pull in other elements as much as we can. And again, as Emma said, we might have to create different versions of the same resource for different people to make them in general accessible to as wide, not 100%, but as wide a cohort as we can.
Mm-hmm. So before you were saying things like don't use italics for emphasis, and another thing is don't use color. So how do you emphasize if, for example, you've got a question that's saying, you know, let's say it's a multiple choice question, and they have to choose which one is not the correct answer, and unless you emphasize not, they may miss the fact that they need to choose the one that's wrong. How do you suggest in those situations creating an emphasis without color and italic?
Fern and Rhonda, would you like to answer that?
Well, you use bold for things like within text, paragraphs, that sort of thing. But there are other ways that you can sort of emphasize different things, just depending on what it is. So you can, again, use placement on the page. But generally, yeah, you want to try and keep it as easy to read, and distracting with the use of, you know, different colors and that sort of thing. It can kind of confuse the students who are like, well, what is it actually meaning? Whereas if you're consistently emphasizing through the use of, say, bold, it makes it a lot easier for the student to recognize, well, this is something to pay attention to, because it's, you know, being pointed out to.
We also caution against overuse of bold, because we've seen PowerPoint slides that bolds every other word. So what is the most important point that you want to bold? So we have consideration for being really simple and really clear.
I see that Anna has her hand up. She's been waiting patiently.
Sorry, Anna.
No, that's okay. I actually loaded at some point because I forgot my question. So I in the breakout room, we talked about us basically being very happy and following a lot of do's, and us having all the student diversities and, you know, backgrounds represented. So how do you manage a PowerPoint for students who want images but can't have images, and, you know, all of it at the same time? So it was good to hear that we can do our best, and we've been thinking about two things. So I have two questions. So the first one is, can you recommend a piece of software or anything that could help transcribe workshop recordings, for example? Zoom does that now, but it's not perfect. And if a person has some accent, it's even worse. So it would be good to know if you would recommend some transcription services. And yeah, let me stop at that for now.
We don't deal with transcription. So if anybody else in this room has an answer, what we provide are transcripts. And if we're dealing with our YouTube videos, we put our own captions in, because we know that YouTube's captions are not perfect. So we actually hand type and transcribe them and put it into YouTube. It's a lot of work, we understand, but we think it's worth it, worth our time to do that. And our resources sit on our site all the time for students to use. So therefore, we invest the time for that. Anybody have an answer about transcribing software? As far as I know, a lot of them are just built in, like for Zoom or Teams or so on.
Yeah, I've remembered the second question. It's the third day that's been super long this week. So it's great to create multiple versions of everything all the time, but it's not always possible. So, you know, I have a team there are 3 of us full-time, 7,000 students in the Faculty of Education. So, you know, it's very specific content. And I've been thinking that maybe we should have some sort of a button inviting students to contact us if they believe they would need something that's more accessible or a different version of something. What should this button look and feel like to be as accessible as possible? Thank you.
We do have a report a problem button on our Moodle site. It goes actually to a Qualtrics quiz or some kind of other software where we can collate the answers. You can also have it put into your email address. So we have an Ask an Advisor email address. So different questions also get referred to the email. So it's just a menu, simple menu button that you add onto your site and it gets reported elsewhere.
So in Moodle, the top bar, the menu with images, can screen readers read those, the words under the images?
I don't know how your Moodle is set up. Every university has it set up very differently. And the way ours is set up is we did away with tiles. We have a very different design for it. We kind of did our own kind of manually created.
Oh, because we've been asked to use grid and tiles. So
yeah, sometimes you have to conform to the formatting required by your university and work around that. So with Moodle, especially, we had to build in a lot of workarounds to make it do what we want to for accessibility.
Yeah, and I know someone asked, and maybe I just missed it, was in the chat, or there was a question about screen readers. So someone said, can we, like, how do we know how screen readers work? Are there screen readers out there we could just sort of like play
around with?
Yeah.
If you look at the Canvas site link that was posted before in chat, the Canvas forum actually has information about 4 different screen readers and links to them that Canvas itself uses as their source, as their foundation for accessibility.
I just wanted to address some of the questions that have come up in chat. I think Emma asked if approaching creating documents this way means being more careful and thoughtful about the kinds of images that we're putting in there, because we have to do that alt text. Yes, that's certainly been my experience when creating these kinds of documents, is that there's a lot less extraneous stuff that you put in. You get very comfortable with kind of having white space there, and sort of starting to think about, well, what pedagogical purpose does it serve to have this image here, and how can I communicate that purpose to students who are accessing this document in another way? There was also a question about the use of HTML. Can we talk about the benefits of HTML? Alice, you're our coding guru. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
I'm not a coding guru, but I learned enough to understand how it works in the back end for Moodle and Canvas. So Canvas itself, we have a team of digital education designers. They've actually built accessibility into their coding. So we simply copy their coding as is to build different formats. Now, Moodle is less accessible that way. We've had to source our own coding for it, but definitely if you have an HTML editor in your platform, use that. It's better than typing things onto the page, because some of the things you type may not reflect properly in the HTML end of things, and therefore not quite as accessible. But in Moodle, there are built-in tools, though, to insert alt text for images and tables and other different. So I guess you have to look at your platform. If you're interested, and if you do want to do this, explore around what platform you have and what built-in accessibility tools that are there.
And of course, our little team is also all self-taught. You know, we don't have any official training on like maintaining a website. We're doing our best. We're doing our best. In the chat, I see that a lot of people are dropping suggestions for different sort of transcription software and things like that, which is really great to see.
We might have to, sorry, because of time, everyone, we're going to have to wrap up. But again, feel free to contact us or stay for a couple more minutes after these post-session survey if you want to chat a little bit more. So we're going to go on to the wrap-up message. Emma?
So really the final message that we'd like all of you to go away with today is that good accessibility design is good for all learners. We've talked a lot in the session today about things like screen readers and students who have visual impairments or hearing impairments and need those kind of special accessibility things, but making things more accessible to those students makes them more accessible to all students. And as we saw when Alice was manipulating that Microsoft Word document, making it more accessible also made it more consistent, made it better formatted, made it more pleasing to look at and easier for students to follow the flow of. We'd also like to thank very much everybody. Oh, wow. Thank you all very much for attending this session. Huge thanks to Steve, May, and Tiana for the initial feedback on this session when we approached them with the idea. And if we could ask everybody to hang on for one more minute, because May is briefly going to tell you what's coming up in the next Connect, Inspire, Share session.
Do we have May here?
Is May here? I
Oh
don't
dear.
see her.
Maybe. Actually, I haven't seen her name here, so maybe she's.
Okay.
Oh,
No worries.
all right. Steve is now going to tell us.
That's the way. Our next session is a Meet the Author session, and it is going to be delivered or facilitated by May, who's not here, and delivered by Claire Power and Evelyn Hibbert, who wrote an article for the AALL journal, and it's around transition, student transition and empowering student transition, which is again something I think we're all really super interested in. And can I just sort of add while I'm here, this has been a great session. I find these things fascinating, and I think it's a great paired session with the first one that Tiana facilitated, and the two students gave to us on enabling students and breaking down barriers to access, which I think is also what this is talking about too, about ensuring access for all students. And the ideas of UDL are really well known and well received. And so Alice and Emma and Fern and Rhonda, thank you very, very much for a great session. Alice, would you like to sign off and lead us out?
Well, if you can quickly, for those of us who are still here, that would be really helpful if we can get some feedback about the session and about future AALL sessions. So this is straight on Zoom, so you can just answer on your screen if you are able to. Can everyone see the poll?
Yeah.
Okay. There we go. We're getting an answer in.
Is saying she can't.
Oh, okay.
Should be on your screen, Joe.
If you can, if you're on a mobile device, that's okay. Please post in chat, or I can also send these questions later. I have the list of attendees, so I might pursue you guys and send an email as a follow-up if you don't mind.
Thank you. Yes, I can see it now. It just didn't come through straight away.
Sure. And again, once we leave this room, all the links will disappear. So if you want to grab anything, please do so.
And a copy of this presentation will be available with all of the links and stuff afterwards.
Thanks, and I've just saved the chat. Yes.
Yes, I definitely want to save the chat. There's some great little nuggets in there.
Great idea. Yeah, we have enabled save chat, so if you did want to do that. And once you
whereabouts on the website is this all going to be saved?
The AALL website, there's a tile there called, actually, can anybody find the direct link to the AALL site? Sorry, I should have
I'll get it now.
There's a tile there called events. I'll call it events. And if you click on that tile, it will bring up past sessions. So if you actually miss past sessions, you can access them now, post session.
Actually, I think it's the PD one, Alice.
PD one, okay.
Yeah, there's in the left menu, there's professional development. I'll put the link in chat.
Thank you, Steve.
I'm just popping it in now. There you go.
Great, thank you so much.
No worries. And on the professional development page, it's the Connect, Inspire, Share one. You should be able to find that, no problem.
Okay.
Yeah, it's top left, you won't miss it.
So if we kind of officially concluded the session, again, thank you for attending, but if you don't want to stay for a couple minutes more, please do. And also, I think Steve will stay with us to just do a debriefing. Is that okay? Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. But if you need to go, we hope to be in touch again through another session.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for your time.
Amazing, super useful. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.